The quiet streets of St. Mary's Hollow hum with faith, but beneath the surface, a forbidden romance is about to ignite a firestorm. Father Michael Brennan, a young priest with a rebel soul, never expected Claire Dawson, a widow with a shadowy past, to unravel his world with a single, trembling confession. Their stolen moments promised escape, until Evelyn Hart's prying eyes turned their sin into a public threat. She swore to bring them down, but she didn't count on the secrets piling up. A pregnancy, a suspicious death, and a mentor closing in on the truth. As the town turns hostile and the stakes climb, Michael's faith crumbles under the weight of his choices. 2 murders will stain this holy ground before the night is out, but whose blood will spill, and whose lies will bury the rest. In this crucible of love and betrayal, salvation is just a whisper from damnation. Before we continue, friends, I kindly ask you to subscribe to my channel. It only takes a second for you, but for me, it's an extra motivation to keep creating videos. I'd also really appreciate a comment. Thank you for your support, and now let's continue with the story. The air in St. Mary's Hollow hung heavy with wood smoke and the musk of wet earth, drifting through the crooked streets like a sigh too weary to rise. Tucked into Pennsylvania's rolling hills, the town gripped its cobblestone past, its weathered houses glowing faintly under an October moon. Lanterns swayed along the paths, their light fracturing into jagged shadows that clawed at the steeple of St. Mary's Church, a stone guardian looming over the hollow. Inside, the pews groaned as Father Michael Brennan's voice wove through the chill, a thread of heat in the cold. At 32, he was a priest out of time, his dark hair brushing his collar, his hazel eyes alight with a restless fire that pulled the congregation closer. Tonight, he spoke of Job, his words sharp and deliberate, cutting through the frost. Suffering, he said, pausing as the syllable lingered, tests us, bends us until we break or endure. His hands trembled faintly on the pulpit, a secret quake he hid beneath the cadence of scripture. Below, in the 3rd row, Claire Dawson sat rigid, her fingers knotted in her lap. Her black coat, frayed at the cuffs, clung to her like a second skin, worn thin by years of solitude. At 40, she bore a beauty that unsettled. High cheekbones framed by auburn hair that tumbled loose, and storm-gray eyes that held too much for one soul. 5 years ago, her husband, Robert, was found dead in their barn, a whiskey bottle cradled in his stiff fingers. The coroner ruled it an accident, but the town's whispers painted darker pictures. Claire never countered them, her silence a fortress, her presence at Mass a ritual as constant as the bells toll. Lately, she'd lingered after services, her hands brushing hymnals as she volunteered in the vestry, her gaze catching Michael's a beat too long. He felt it, a pull he told himself was pity, though it gnawed deeper, a hunger he feared naming. The congregation dispersed as the final amen dissolved, leaving the church cavernous, its stained-glass saints watching in stern silence. Michael adjusted his cassock, the fabric whispering against his skin, when Claire's voice pierced the quiet. "Father, a moment?" Her words were soft, but a tremor laced them, fragile and urgent. He turned, meeting her shadowed eyes, and nodded toward the sacristy. The room reeked of wax and aged timber, its lone bulb casting a sickly yellow over the vestments. Claire closed the door, the latch's snap ringing sharp. "I need to confess," she said, her gaze dropping. "But not here. Somewhere safer." Her voice held an edge, pleading yet calculated, as if testing him. Michael's chest tightened, a flare of dread he smothered. His vows loomed like iron bars, yet her nearness tugged at a thread he'd buried since seminary. A longing for something human, warm, forbidden. "The rectory," he said, his tone firm despite the pulse hammering in his throat. "Tomorrow after Vespers." She nodded, a flicker crossing her face. Relief or something else? And slipped into the night. He stood alone, her lavender scent lingering, a ghost that mocked the crucifix on the wall. Outside, the wind shrieked through the oaks, branches rattling like a warning he couldn't heed. Morning draped St. Mary's Hollow in fog, the diner's neon buzzing faintly as pickups growled down Main Street. Michael moved through his duties, visiting the infirm, Bible in hand, but his mind drifted to Claire. He saw her at last spring's picnic, pouring lemonade, her laugh a rare crack in her armor. He'd felt it then, too, a spark he doused with prayer, though it smoldered still. Now it flared, and with it came fear, of himself, of the man beneath the collar who craved her voice, her touch. At the rectory that evening, he stoked the fireplace, the logs hissing as flames leapt. The house was sparse. Books, a crucifix, a life pared to essentials. He set out tea, the steam curling like a question, when her knock jolted him. Claire entered, mist clinging to her coat, her hair damp and wild. She hesitated, then sank into the armchair, clutching the cup as if it anchored her. "I don't know how to say this," she murmured, her voice a threadbare whisper. Michael sat opposite, the fire carving hollows in his face. "Say what's true," he urged, though his heart begged her to stop. She inhaled, her fingers shaking. "It's Robert. I've kept this locked away, but I don't believe he just died. And it's breaking me." Her eyes met his, raw and searching. Yet there was a glint, grief, or a gambit. His vows screamed in his skull, flee, resist. But her words hooked him, a lure he couldn't shake. Was she unburdening her soul, or weaving him into something darker? "How so?" he asked, his voice a rasp. Claire's lips parted, then pressed shut, as if weighing what to give. "We fought that night," she said at last. "He was drunk, cruel, spoke of another woman. I left him in the barn, raging, and when I returned, he was cold." Her gaze fell, her hands twisting the cup. "I've borne that alone, until you." Her voice cracked, a widow's ache laid bare, yet the tilt of her head hinted at more, a need or a play. Michael's breath caught. "Until me," he echoed, the words a plea he hadn't meant. His mind spun. Years of celibacy, nights wrestling doubt, now teetering on her confession. Claire's eyes lifted, unguarded yet piercing. "I feel something with you," she said, her tone brittle. "Something I can't bury." The words struck like flint, sparking a fire he'd sworn to extinguish. He stood, pacing to the window, rain streaking the glass in silver veins. "I'm bound, Claire," he said, a mantra fraying at the edges, his reflection a stranger staring back. She rose, stepping near, her warmth a temptation he felt in his bones. "I know," she whispered, close enough to touch. "But you feel it too." A sharp knock shattered the moment, jarring his pulse. Through the glass, Evelyn Hart's silhouette loomed, gray hair tight, mouth a grim slash. The town's gossip queen, her eyes missed nothing, her words cut deeper. She rapped again, relentless. "Father Michael?" Her voice sliced through, laced with doubt. Claire recoiled, her face ashen, and Michael's thoughts raced. He motioned her to stay, then cracked the door, forcing calm. "Evelyn, it's late. What's this about?" Her gaze darted past him, hawk-like. "Saw lights," she said, clipped. "And Claire's coat. Checking alls, right?" Suspicion dripped from her, and Michael's grip on the frame whitened. "She's sorting hymnals," he lied, the taste sour. Evelyn's lips thinned, unconvinced, but she retreated. "Good night," she said, her stare a promise of trouble. He shut the door, turning to Claire. Her breath was shallow, her eyes wide. "She knows," she whispered, fear or cunning, threading her words. The fire spat embers into the gloom, and outside, the storm swelled, a restless dirge. Michael slumped into his chair, torn between sanctity and sin, while Claire stood, her loneliness a palpable shroud, her motives a shadow he couldn't grasp. Evelyn's intrusion was no accident. In this town, eyes were everywhere, and secrets were prey. Whatever stirred between them, Michael sensed it. A line crossed, a spark struck, and St. Mary's Hollow was poised to blaze. Dawn broke over St. Mary's Hollow with a drizzle that left the streets gleaming like oil, the air sharp with the bite of wet stone. Father Michael Brennan stood at the rectory's threshold, his eyes tracing the church steeple against a bruised sky. Sleep had been a stranger. His mind a churn of Claire's whispered confession and Evelyn's hawkish glare from the night before. The collar chafed today, a yoke he'd once borne willingly, now a reminder of vows teetering on a razor's edge. He pulled on his coat, boots striking the slick cobblestones as he headed for St. Mary's, each step a drumbeat of dread and desire he couldn't silence. Inside, the sanctuary buzzed with the soft clack of hymnals. Claire was there, her auburn hair swept back, her hands swift and sure as she stacked books. Her storm-gray eyes flicked to him, a spark igniting then dimming as she turned away. "You're early," she murmured, her voice a thread of tension. Michael stepped closer, lavender teasing his senses. "Couldn't stay away," he said, the admission rough, unguarded. Her fingers faltered, the air thickening between them. The church door groaned open, and Evelyn Hart swept in, her gray coat a shroud, her gaze cutting like glass. "Busy already, Father?" she asked, her tone a velvet blade. Michael's gut twisted. He slid between her and Claire, who gripped the pew, knuckles white. "Vespers prep," he said curtly. Evelyn's eyes lingered on Claire, a predator sizing prey. "Such dedication," she purred, her smile venomous. "Wonder what fuels it." She pivoted and strode out, the door slamming like a judge's gavel. Claire's breath hissed out, her frame sagging. "She's circling," she said, voice low and jagged. Michael's hand twitched toward her, restrained by a fraying thread of will. "She's a pest," he countered, though Evelyn's shadow loomed larger now, a threat with teeth. Claire's gaze pierced him. "She's more. She's destroyed lives here. Lies that stick like tar. She'll bury us." Her urgency clawed at him, her fear, or was it a gambit? Stirring his unease. Dusk painted the rectory in amber as Michael stoked the fire, embers snapping like accusations. Claire arrived unbidden, wind-tossed and resolute, her coat shedding mist. "This has to stop," she said, staring into the flames. "But I can't walk away." He leaned in, heat rising in his chest. "Then don't," he rasped, a surrender he couldn't claw back. Her hand grazed his cheek, a spark that jolted him. His vows screamed, but her touch was a balm to a wound he'd ignored too long, a loneliness he'd buried in prayer. Their lips met, tentative then fierce, a stolen blaze that seared his soul. When they broke apart, breathless, Claire's eyes gleamed. "No going back," she whispered, and he nodded, the weight a stone on his chest. A crunch of leaves snapped him to the window. Evelyn, umbrella aloft, stood beneath an oak, her stare fixed on the rectory. A chill slithered down his spine. "She's here," he hissed. Claire's face tightened, a flash of steel cutting her panic. "Or she never left," she said, her tone cryptic, a riddle he couldn't unravel. She grabbed her coat and darted out the back, swallowed by the dark before he could question her. By midday, the hollow thrummed with unease. Parishioners' glances darted his way at the diner, their murmurs a low hum of suspicion. Evelyn's handiwork, he knew, her whispers spreading like rot. He cornered her at the church, where she fussed with altar flowers, her movements a taunt. "Tongues are wagging, Father," she said, eyes glinting. "About you." Her. His fists balled, restraint fraying. "You're poisoning the well," he growled. She rose, unflinching. "I've asked Tom, my nephew, the journalist, to poke around. That widow's past stinks of secrets." Tom. A name that hit like a fist, a bloodhound with ink for claws. Michael's pulse spiked. "Back off, Evelyn," he warned, voice low and lethal. Her smile was ice. Too late. Night fell hard, and Claire burst into the rectory, hair wild, eyes darting. "Evelyn was at my door," she said, shoving past him, her voice a tight wire. "Left this." She thrust a photograph into his hands. Grainy, damning. Her outside the barn, face contorted, Robert's shadow in the frame. Michael's stomach lurched. "Where'd she get it?" he demanded. Claire paced, her laugh sharp as broken glass. Someone's been watching, then now. If she's got more, we're done. Her words trembled, but her eyes held a glint. Panic or a mask? He gripped the photo, paper creasing. We'll stop her, he said, the promise thin against the storm brewing. A knock jolted them, harsh, insistent. Michael peered out, expecting Evelyn's grim silhouette, but the porch was bare. Another rap, frantic, from the back. He flung open the rear door, and Mrs. Delaney stumbled in, her face ghost-white. Father, the church, smoke's rising, she gasped. Michael's blood iced, his gaze snapping to Claire. She stood rigid, the photo clutched tight, her expression a locked door. Was this Evelyn's strike, or something closer? Sirens wailed in the distance, a keening that matched the dread coiling in his gut, as the night stretched thin, poised to break. A haze of smoke lingered over St. Mary's Hollow, coiling through the skeletal oaks, the air bitter with char and damp rot. The church stood gutted, its steeple a blackened spire piercing a sky heavy with threat. Father Michael Brennan raced from the rectory, his boots slipping on muddy ground, Claire a fleeting shape at his side. Sirens shrieked, their crimson pulses slashing the fog as silhouettes gathered. Parishioners, mouths agape, eyes glassy in the firelight. Flames gnawed at the vestry, spitting embers that glowed like devil's eyes against the stone. Michael seized a bucket, water sloshing cold against his wrists as he flung it at the blaze, steam hissing in defiance. Claire wielded a hose, her soot-streaked face taut, her movements jerky. Desperation, or something rehearsed? Firefighters swarmed, their yells swallowed by the inferno's growl, until the flames guttered out, leaving a smoldering ruin. Michael's breath rasped, his eyes meeting Claire's in the dim aftermath. Her gaze flickered, wild, unreadable, and his stomach twisted. Was she shaken, or playing him? Someone meant this, she whispered, her voice a thread in the wind. Before he could answer, Father Gregory loomed from the murk, his cassock streaked with ash, his weathered face carved with grief and rage. Michael's mentor, once a rock, now trembled with a fury that made his blue eyes blaze. This is sacred ground, Gregory snapped, his voice cracking. And you're here when it falls? Michael's chest seized. Did Gregory see betrayal in the ashes? We tried to stop it, he said, throat raw. Gregory's stare shifted to Claire, then back, heavy with unspoken accusations, his love for the church a wound bleeding through his silence. Dawn crept in, gray and merciless, the church a charred husk exhaling tendrils of smoke. Michael lingered, kicking at a singed cross, its edges crumbling under his boot. Gregory grabbed his arm, fingers digging like claws. You're unraveling, he said, his tone low, bitter. I poured my soul into this place, into you, and now it's ash and rumors. His eyes, red-rimmed, betrayed a father's anguish for a wayward son, a shepherd mourning a flock led astray. Michael's pulse hammered, paranoia prickling his skin. It's lies, he muttered, but his voice shook. Gregory's grip tightened. I'll find the truth, Michael. For St. Mary's, for you. He let go, stalking off, his shadow a jagged scar on the dawn. Claire approached, her coat dangling, ash dusting her hair like a crown of guilt. He's turning on you, she said, her whisper sharp. Michael's hands balled, sweat beading despite the chill. He's grasping. He shot back, but his eyes traced her face. Too calm, too steady. Was she his anchor or his noose? That fire wasn't chance, he said, testing her. She nodded, lips tight. Evelyn's got reach. I've seen her ruin people. Her certainty chilled him, a puzzle piece he couldn't place. At the diner, the air thickened with whispers, the clink of mugs a nervous rhythm. Michael slid into a booth, his spine stiff, every glance from the locals a needle under his skin. Were they watching, waiting? A waitress hovered, her voice hushed. They're saying arson. Someone saw a figure running. His gut lurched, whose shadow? Across the room, Evelyn sat with a lean man, Tom, her nephew. His pen scratching furiously, her gestures clipped. Michael's fingers dug into the table, nails scraping wood. They were hunting, and he felt the snare tightening. By afternoon, Claire pounded on the rectory door, her knock a frantic pulse. She shoved a crumpled note at him, ink smeared on rough paper. "I saw you. Run or it's worse." His breath hitched, the words a cold fist around his heart. "Under my mat," she said, her voice quaking, eyes darting to the fogged windows. "Evelyn? Or someone closer?" He clutched the note, paranoia blooming. Was she baiting him, her fear too convenient? "We hit back," he said, voice low, but his hands shook. She gripped his wrist, her touch a jolt. "Not without leverage. She'll crush us." Her urgency rang hollow, a script he couldn't trust. Dusk fell, heavy and oppressive, the hollow cloaked in a mist that swallowed sound. Michael sought Gregory at the parish house, its walls damp with the scent of mildew and despair. The older priest hunched over a desk, a ledger splayed, his pen trembling as he scrawled. Michael knocked, stepping in. "What now?" Gregory growled, his voice thick with fatigue, his love for the church a palpable ache in the cramped room. "The fire's a message," Michael said, leaning in. "Help me trace it." Gregory's eyes lifted, weary but piercing. "You're drowning, boy. I built this parish, watched you grow in it, and now you're dragging it down." Michael's jaw clenched, the sting of betrayal sharp. "You're blind," he retorted, turning away. Gregory's voice cut through. "I'll dig, Michael, for its sake, and yours." The promise hung, a blade poised to fall. Claire waited at the rectory, firelight casting her shadow long and twisted. "Gregory?" she asked, her tone clipped. He slapped the note down, glass rattling. "He's hunting us." Her face paled, but her posture stiffened, a glint in her eyes. Fear or strategy? "Tom's at the library," she said, stepping close, her breath warm. "Old papers. He's got my name now." Michael's heart thudded, two fronts, closing fast. Was she warning him or weaving him tighter? A crash split the silence. Glass sprayed inward as a brick thudded onto the floor. Claire flinched, her nails biting his arm, while Michael lunged to the shattered window. Footsteps melted into the mist, a phantom's retreat. He snatched the brick, red paint glaring. "Sinner." His knees buckled, the word a lash across his soul. Claire's gasp was soft, her eyes scanning the dark. Too quick, too keen. "They're here," she whispered, her voice a thread of steel. He whirled on her, doubt surging. Whose hand struck, and whose shadow loomed largest? The night thickened, a trap snapping shut, as the hollow waited to claim its next prey. Mist draped St. Mary's Hollow in a clammy veil, muffling the crunch of glass as Father Michael Brennan swept the rectory floor, the broom's bristles scraping like whispers of guilt. The brick, sinner, smoldered in his memory, its weight a ghost in his palm after he'd flung it into the fire. Claire lingered by the broken window, her silhouette taut against the wavering flames, her fingers brushing the jagged edge with a delicacy that prickled his nerves. "They're relentless," she said, her voice soft yet edged, a thread of steel beneath silk. Michael's heart stuttered, his gaze flicking to her. Her poise jarred him, too composed for the chaos. He let the broom fall, its thud sharp in the stillness. "Who's they?" he pressed, stepping near, his breath fogging in the cold seeping through the gap. Her eyes met his, dark and fathomless. "Evelyn, Tom. Maybe others who've sniffed blood." Her ambiguity stung, a barb he couldn't grasp. A car engine growled faintly through the fog, headlights slicing the gray before vanishing. Michael tensed, his grip tightening on the doorframe, nails biting wood. "Someone's circling," he muttered, sweat beading despite the chill. Claire's lips parted, but a knock, crisp, deliberate, cut her off. He opened the door, bracing for Evelyn's sneer, but Tom stood there, rain slicking his coat, a manila folder clutched tight. His sharp face gleamed with quiet triumph, his eyes darting past Michael. "Father," he said, his tone clipped, authoritative. "A word." Michael's stomach twisted, but he nodded Tom in. Sensing the shift, Tom held the reins now. Claire edged back, her posture stiffening. Her gaze locked on the folder like a cornered animal sizing a trap. Tom dropped the folder onto the table with a soft slap, papers fanning out. Clippings, notes, a photo of a barn at twilight. "County Archives," he said, his finger jabbing a headline. "Widow's husband, 5 years dead, whiskey," they claimed, but whispers say otherwise. His stare pinned Claire, who stood rigid, her breath shallow, her control slipping. Michael's throat closed. Tom wielded facts like a blade, and he felt it cutting too close. "Why drag me into this?" he snapped, his voice fraying. Tom's lips curled, a predator's grin. "You're tethered to her father. Evelyn's convinced you're shielding secrets. I'm inclined to believe her." He nudged the photo. Claire outside that barn, fury etched in her stance, a shadow lurking behind. Michael snatched it, hands trembling, the image a shard of doubt piercing deeper. Claire's voice sliced through, firm but brittle. "That's nothing, old rumors spun into webs." Her defiance wavered, and Michael wondered. Was she pleading or parrying? Tom leaned closer, his tone dropping. "A witness saw you two last night, before the church went up. Explain that." Michael's blood iced, his mind scrambling. Another pair of eyes, unseen, feeding this hunt. Claire stepped forward, her hand hovering over the folder, then retreating. "The police are sniffing around now," she said, her voice low, a tremor betraying her calm. "They hauled in a kid from the hollow. Thinks he saw someone with a can near the vestry. They'll come for us next." Her eyes flicked to Michael, wide with dread or calculation, and his chest tightened. She feared the law, yet her restraint hinted at deeper currents. Michael glared at Tom. "You've got no proof," he said, shoving the folder back, papers sliding. Tom caught it, his grip possessive. "Not yet, but I'll keep this and dig deeper. Watch yourself, father." He turned to Claire, his voice softening, a taunt. "And you, sleep light." He strode out, the door clicking shut, leaving a silence thick with menace. Claire exhaled, her hands clenching, then unclenching. "He's a vulture," she muttered, but her gaze lingered on the fire, thoughtful. Michael rounded on her, his voice a hiss. "What else are you holding back?" She met his stare, her eyes glistening, then dropped a bomb. "I'm pregnant." The word struck like lightning, splitting him open. Joy flared, a fleeting warmth, then drowned in guilt, fear crashing over him like a wave. He staggered back, gripping the table, his knees weak. "How long?" he croaked, his mind a storm. Her child, his child, a sin made flesh. "Weeks," she said, her voice cracking, her hand brushing her stomach with a tenderness that gutted him. "I couldn't say, not with them closing in." His breath hitched, ecstasy warring with terror. Here was life, his legacy, tangled in a vow he'd shattered. But doubt gnawed. Did she wield this now to bind him, to sway his faltering will? "We're trapped," he whispered, his decision teetering. Protect her, or flee the wreckage she might bring. The door creaked open, and Father Gregory stepped in, rain streaking his face, his eyes hollow with weariness and resolve. Michael froze. Had he heard? Gregory's gaze swept the room, pausing on the ashes in the hearth. Then Claire. "What's gone up in smoke?" he asked, his voice rough, a quiet storm brewing. Michael straightened, palms slick. "Just trash," he lied. But Gregory's stare cut deeper. A man who'd molded him now seeing a stranger. "You're slipping," Gregory said, advancing. "I tailed you last night. Saw you leave here late, then the church burned." His words landed heavy, a mentor's trust fracturing. Claire interjected, her tone measured. "He was with me, sorting things." Gregory's lips twitched, disdainful. "Sorting," he echoed, then faced Michael. "This parish was my life. Now it's cinders, and you're the thread unraveling it. Confess or I take it higher, tomorrow." Michael's hands shook, joy and dread from Claire's news twisting with Gregory's demand. Nothing to tell, he said, the lie bitter, his eyes darting to Claire, her poise a cipher. Gregory pulled a vial from his coat. Clear liquid glinting like sin in the firelight. Kerosene from the vestry, he said, his voice steady, accusing. Someone's handiwork. Michael's gut dropped, his mind racing. Whose? Claire's breath caught, her fingers twitching toward her sleeve. A fleeting tick he caught. Was it shock or something known? Gregory pocketed it, his gaze unrelenting. I'll root this out, Michael. If it's you, I won't save you. He left, the door banging shut, a tolling bell. Claire seized Michael's arm, her grip fierce yet trembling. He's a hound now, she said, her voice urgent. And Tom. The police are with him, asking about the fire, my name. Her fear spiked, raw and real, but her eyes gleamed, calculating. Michael pulled free, his skin crawling. You knew about the kerosene, he accused, his voice low, the pregnancy's glow dimming under suspicion. Her face hardened. No, I swear, she said, but her pause lingered, a shadow he couldn't trust. He paced, the room a cage, the fog outside a suffocating shroud. Was she his salvation or his ruin? A metallic clank rang out. Something struck stone beyond the window. Michael lunged to the gap, peering into the mist. A figure flitted past, a blade's edge catching the dim light. Claire pressed close, her breath hot, ragged. They're here, she whispered, her voice quaking. Yet her grip on him steadied, possessive. His heart thundered, joy, guilt, and fear colliding. Who stalked them, and whose hand turned the key in this lock? The night loomed, a predator's jaws, waiting to snap shut. Thunder snarled over St. Mary's Hollow, rattling the rectory's cracked walls as rain battered the broken window, pooling in dark, restless patches across the floor. Father Michael Brennan stood rigid, the phantom gleam of a blade outside haunting his vision, his pulse hammering like a trapped bird against his ribs. Claire pressed near, her breath uneven, her fingers curling into his arm. Her grasp too precise, too measured for the dread she murmured. They're closing in, she said, her voice threading the storm's roar, her eyes flicking to the shadows beyond the glass. A widow's hollowed gaze sharpened by solitude. Michael's stomach knotted, her pregnancy. His child, a fragile ember of joy smothered by suspicion. Was she his sanctuary or a lure? He jerked free, boots sloshing, and snatched the poker from the hearth, its cold iron a tether against the pull of her nearness. Stay here, he rasped, his tone edged with doubt, a shield against the longing she stirred. Lightning ripped the sky, drenching the hollow in stark light, and he stepped onto the porch, wind tearing at his coat, rain pricking his face like accusations. The figure had vanished, but muddy prints shone on the steps, bold, mocking. His grip on the poker tightened, his breath snagging as he scoured the fog-draped street, every gust a whisper of betrayal. A clang echoed from the alley, metal striking stone, and he bolted toward it, heart pounding, temptation gnawing at his vows. The passage stank of moss and rot, and there, in the sludge, a knife glinted, its blade flecked with rust or blood. He crouched, fingers hovering, when a voice scraped the dark. Chasing shadows, father? Michael spun, poker raised, to face Tom, rain flattening his hair, a flashlight slicing the gloom. His eyes held a strange flicker, knowing, almost amused, beneath a mask of calm. Late hunt? Tom said, his beam lingering on the knife, his tone oddly lilting, as if testing a line. Michael's chest heaved, suspicion flaring. Did Tom drop it, or catch him? What's your play? He growled, the poker trembling, his faith a frayed cord straining against her draw. Tom's light held steady. Found that by the church links to the fire. Police are asking after you. Michael's veins chilled, his vows a prison he ached to flee. You're pinning us, he spat, but Tom tilted his head, a ghost of a smile. Not me. Someone's whispering. Dig deeper, they said. The phrase hung, cryptic, a riddle Michael couldn't place. Tom slipped into the mist before Michael could strike, leaving the knife a taunting gleam. He grabbed it, its wet grip fueling his chaos, and lurched back to the rectory, Claire's pull of fire he couldn't quench. She stood by the hearth, coat discarded, hair dripping, a solitary figure carved by years of whispers and empty rooms. The knife clattered onto the table, her gaze sharpening. A glint of something, recognition, before softening. "Where'd that turn up?" she asked, her voice low, her fingers brushing her lips, a fleeting tick. "Allie," he said, pinning her with a stare. "Tom ties it to the fire. What's your piece?" Her mouth twitched, a half-smile gone in an instant, her hands nodding. "Alone too long, or threading a lie?" "Nothing," she said, her pause a beat too long, her eyes drifting to the blade as if it spoke to her. Thunder jolted the walls, and a fierce knock snapped them taut. Michael flung the door open, rain slashing in, revealing Evelyn Hart, her hair plastered, her face ablaze with zeal. "You've sunk too low," she hissed, pushing past, her umbrella trailing water like a scar. She thrust a sodden envelope at him, her voice a lash. "Left at my step, your disgrace." He tore it open, hands quaking. A photo tumbled out, him and Claire locked in embrace, framed by the window, a sin exposed. His breath seized, her pregnancy's promise twisting into dread. A life he'd fathered, now a trap. Claire took it, her fingers brushing the edge with a strange care, her face tightening. "You'd bury us," she said, stepping forward, her tone soft yet commanding. "A widow's quiet strength, or a chess move?" Evelyn's eyes gleamed, triumphant. "I'd purge this town of your stain. Bishop's desk by dawn. Unless you're dust." Michael's sight blurred, guilt warring with a forbidden ache, her child, his blood, a dream he'd buried beneath scripture. He seized Evelyn's arm, his voice a snarl. "For spite." She pulled free, her laugh a blade. "For salvation, father. You've lost it." Claire barred her path, her voice a murmur, laced with intent. "You're stirring a pot you can't taste." Evelyn faltered, her certainty wavering. Did Claire's words echo something unsaid? She shoved past, vanishing into the storm, the door slamming like a guillotine. Claire turned, her eyes alight. "She won't stop," she said, her hand grazing her belly. Protection or a pawn's play? His mind churned, the priest in him clawing back, the man yearning to cradle her. "She's got us," he said, his voice splintering, torn between sanctity and her pull. Boots crunched outside, slow and sure, and he peered through the deluge. Father Gregory approached, flashlight cutting the rain, his face etched with grief and iron. Michael's heart sank. Gregory, his anchor, now his judge. Gregory stepped in, water streaming, his eyes shadowed with resolve. "Evelyn showed me," he said, his voice low, pained. "That photo ends you." Michael's knees wavered, the poker slipping, clanging loud. Gregory drew a gun, worn, dulled, a soldier's relic, his hand firm. "Chaplain's past," he said, his tone flat. "I've prayed for you, Michael, but this stops." Claire edged back, her hand shielding her stomach, a reflex or a cue. Her lips parting in a silent breath. Michael's voice cracked. "You'd forsake me?" Gregory's eyes glistened, conflicted. "You forsook us. My faith in you." Thunder crashed, and Gregory raised the gun, his breath shaky. Michael lunged, grappling, the barrel cold against his flesh. His soul split. Duty or her, God or this life. Claire cried out, snatching a candelabrum, its brass flashing as she struck. It smashed Gregory's skull, blood spilling dark against his hair. He crumpled, still by the hearth, the gun skidding free. Michael reeled, hands slick, staring at the body, his mentor, his compass, lost. Claire let the candelabrum fall, her face pale, her breath hitching, but her eyes met his, fierce, a faint curl to her lips. Grief or a mask slipping? "No choice," she said, her voice quivering yet steady, her hand brushing her hair. A gesture too calm, too practiced. Lightning flared, the room stark. 2 deaths now, Evelyn's threat looming, the knife a silent witness. Michael's chest heaved, his mind a tumult of love and doubt. Had she lured him here, her whispers a net cast wider than he knew? The storm wailed, a mourner's cry, as the hollow braced for the blood yet to flow. Lightning jagged across St. Mary's Hollow. The storm's roar a relentless howl as rain lashed the rectory, drowning the silence left by Father Gregory's crumpled form. Father Michael Brennan stood over the body, the candelabrum slick with blood, the gun inches from lifeless fingers. Claire Dawson knelt nearby, her hands unsteady, her face pale beneath damp strands of hair. The air hung thick with smoke and metal, the knife on the table catching flickers of firelight. Michael's voice cracked, raw with anguish. "We've lost everything." Claire's gaze met his, sharp yet fractured, her fingers brushing her stomach, a gesture heavy with unspoken stakes. "We've bought time," she said, her tone firm despite a tremor, her eyes glinting with a desperate edge he hadn't seen before, a woman teetering on a cliff's brink. Thunder rattled the walls and Michael crossed to the window, the tempest a mirror to his churning mind. Evelyn's blackmail photo a ticking clock, Tom's pursuit a tightening snare. "They'll hunt us down," he said, turning to her. The child she carried a lifeline and a chain. Claire stood, her movements slow, deliberate, and pulled a box of matches from her coat pocket. The same coat she'd worn fleeing the church fire, its lining frayed from restless nights. "We erased the trail," she said, nodding to the church records stacked against the wall, her voice low, her jaw tight with resolve or resignation. Michael's chest seized, the priest in him recoiling. "That's insanity," he snapped, but her eyes flashed, a spark of something fierce. "It's survival," she countered, striking a match, the tiny flame trembling in her grip as if mirroring her fraying will. The fire leapt to life, papers blackening fast, the room hazing with acrid smoke as Michael grabbed her arm, the match falling to sizzle in the wet floor. "No more," he pleaded, his voice splintering, but she pulled free, her touch lingering, a plea or a nudge. "They're too close, Evelyn. The police," she said, her breath hitching, her stare fixed on the blaze as if seeing her own end in it. He pocketed the knife from the table, its heft a grim necessity, and made his choice. "We go," he said, the words a surrender to the man he'd become. Father over cleric, love over duty. Her nod was curt, her hand clutching her coat's inner pocket, a subtle tick he barely caught. They bolted into the storm, the rectory aglow behind them, flames chewing through evidence as rain soaked their skin. The truck's engine coughed awake, headlights piercing the downpour, and they sped west, the hollow's grip fading in the distance. Claire sat rigid, her fingers tracing the coat's seam, her silence heavy with exhaustion or calculation. As the hours blurred into a gray dawn, the Nevada desert stretched before them, vast and unforgiving. The air sharp with dust as Michael steered into a motel lot, its neon sign buzzing faintly. The room was a cave of worn wood and stale air, the bed creaking as they sank onto it, the weight of their flight pressing down. Michael reached for her hand, seeking solace, but she drew back, her gaze distant, her fingers slipping into her coat pocket again, a ritual of unease. "We're clear," he said, his voice thin, a hope he couldn't hold. She gave a faint smile, her eyes hollow, and murmured, "For now." A knock broke the stillness, slow, insistent, a hunter's call. Michael's hand found the knife as he opened the door, revealing a weathered detective, badge glinting, his stare cold and certain. "Michael Brennan?" he asked, his voice a low rasp cutting the quiet. Michael's grip faltered, the blade useless. "That's me," he said, stepping aside, the last of his resistance crumbling. Claire stood, her posture tense, her hand shielding her belly as the detective entered, his boots scuffing the floor. "Tracked you from the hollow," he said, his eyes flicking to Claire, a shadow of doubt crossing his face. "Church is ash, but we've got bodies. Evelyn Hart, throat slashed in her home, Gregory at your place. Leads point here." Michael's knees weakened. Evelyn's murder a shockwave. Whose hand? We didn't touch her, he stammered. But Claire stepped forward, her voice steady, brittle. I killed Gregory to protect us. The detective's brow creased, his hand resting on his holster. But Michael saw her fingers tighten in her pocket, a quiet resolve settling over her. I've carried this too long, she said, her voice dropping, and she pulled a small knife from her coat. The one she'd kept hidden since the barn days, its blade etched with old scars, a companion to her solitude. Michael's breath caught, realization dawning. She'd wielded it before, perhaps on Evelyn, a desperate act to sever their chains. I won't let them take us, she whispered, her eyes meeting his, glistening with a mix of love and despair. Before he could move, she pressed the blade to her throat. A swift, practiced motion, blood blooming red against her pale skin. She fell, a soft thud on the worn floor, her body curling inward as if shielding the life within. Michael dropped beside her, his hands grasping at her fading warmth, a guttural cry tearing from his throat. Claire, why? The detective flinched, his hand frozen mid-reach, the room filling with the wail of approaching sirens. Her knife clattered free, its edge a testament to her final stand. A mother's sacrifice, a widow's escape from a hollow that had stripped her bare. Had she planned this, her every step a march to this end, or had the weight of their sins snapped her at last? The detective muttered into his radio, his voice lost in Michael's sobs, the desert wind rattling the window like a mournful hymn. Later, the motel stood quiet, police lights pulsing across the sand, Michael a hollowed figure in their glare. He confessed to Evelyn's murder. Her blood wasn't his, but the lie was his last gift to Claire, sparing her name as the cuffs clicked shut. The hollow's ashes held its secrets, Gregory's faith, Evelyn's wrath, a love that burned too bright. Claire had fled to him, then from him, her knife a silent vow to end it her way, leaving their child a ghost in the dust. The desert stretched on, indifferent, swallowing a tale of passion and ruin, its whispers lost to the wind. A warning, perhaps, that some bonds break only in blood.